Today we're going to start talking about factoring, and the type of factoring that we're talking about today is we're going to factor by taking out the greatest common factor. That's what GCF stands for. So we're sort of going to be doing the opposite of the distributive property. Instead of having a number outside of the parentheses and distributing it to everything inside the parentheses, we're going to do the opposite of that, and we're going to look to find a greatest common factor to take out of each term. So I'm going to look at the two terms I have here. I have 25n plus 30, and I'm going to look at 25 and 30 specifically to see what the greatest common factor would be, and that would be 5. So I'm going to put a 5 on the outside of the parentheses, and then you sort of want to think of, okay, well 5 times what gives me 25n, and that would be 5n. Bring down the plus, 5 times what would give you 30, and that would be 6. And that's it. Factoring out the greatest common factor is going to be the first thing we look for every time we're about to factor. So now we're going to look at the next example. It's a little bit more involved because now we're going to have to also take out some of these m's. So first I'm going to look at 20 and 35, and the greatest common factor there would be 5. Then I'm going to look at the m's, and really all I'm looking for with the m's is whichever one has the lowest exponent. And so that's going to be m to the third power, or m cubed. So I'm going to factor out 5m cubed. That's the greatest common factor for these two terms. And just looking at the 5 first, I'm going to factor out a 5 from 20, and that would leave me with 4. I'm going to take 3 of the m's out of m to the 5th, and that would leave me with 2 m's. Bring down the plus. 5 times 7 would give me 35, so the 7 goes in the parentheses, and I took out all of the m's from the second term. One way to check is to actually go through and distribute after you've factored, just to make sure you end up with what you started with. Here's our next example, and I'm going to look at all three numbers first, 63, 70, and 28, and think of what the greatest common factor with those are first, and that would be 7. So I'm going to factor out a 7, and then I'm going to look at the n's and find whichever one has the smallest exponent, and that's going to be the n to the first power right here. So I'm going to factor out 7n. And another way you can kind of figure out what's left over in the parentheses is taking 63 and dividing it by 7, and that would give us 9. I'm going to take an n from the n cubed, and I would have 2 of those n's left over, n squared. Plus 70 divided by 7 would be 10. And again, I'm going to take one of these n's out, and I'm left with n. Plus 28 divided by 7 is 4. And I already factored this n out. So if I were to distribute this 7n to all three terms, I would end up with what I started with. And that's what we want. I'm going to have you do this problem right here, and we're going to continue with this discussion in class. See you then.